Growing up, my parents, Rebecca and Michael Caldwell, always told me we were just getting by. They clipped coupons, bought generic brands, and constantly reminded me that money didn't grow on trees. So imagine my shock when I discovered they had been hiding millions from me my entire life. What did I did next? I bought the very bank where they kept their fortune and froze every single one of their accounts. But this story starts much earlier than that moment of revenge. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Victoria Caldwell, and for the first 22 years of my life, I believed my family was middle class at best. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in Riverside, Ohio, where my father worked as what I thought was a low-level accountant, and my mother claimed to be a part-time administrative assistant. Our car was a 10-year-old Honda Civic. Our furniture came from discount stores, and family vacations meant camping trips to state parks. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I asked for something that cost more than $20, the answer was always the same. We can't afford that right now, honey. Maybe next year when things are better. I learned to stop asking. I got a job at 15, working at the local diner after school and on weekends, saving every penny for college because my parents made it crystal clear that they couldn't help with tuition. While my classmates got new cars for their 16th birthdays, I rode the bus. While they went on spring break trips to Florida, I picked up extra shifts at the diner. I wasn't bitter about it. I actually admired my parents for teaching me the value of hard work and financial responsibility. I thought we were a family that faced our struggles together with dignity. The scholarship I earned to Ohio State University felt like winning the lottery. My parents seemed proud, but even then, they reminded me that I'd need to cover my own living expenses. So I worked 3 part-time jobs throughout college, tutoring math, waitressing at an upscale restaurant, and doing freelance bookkeeping for small businesses. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance and economics, driven by a burning desire to never experience the financial stress I'd watched my parents endure. My first job out of college was with Henderson & Associates, a prestigious investment firm in Columbus. I was hungry, determined, and incredibly good with numbers. Within 2 years, I was managing portfolios worth tens of millions of dollars. By 25, I was the youngest senior analyst in the company's history. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, making more money than my parents ever had, finally able to help them financially. That's when I decided to surprise them. I had saved up enough for a down payment on a beautiful house in the suburbs, something they had always dreamed of but could never afford. I wanted to buy it for them as a thank you for all their sacrifices. I planned to present them with the keys on their wedding anniversary. I started looking at properties in Westfield, an upscale neighborhood about 30 minutes from their current home. The real estate agent, Sandra Martinez, was showing me through a stunning colonial with a wraparound porch when she mentioned something that stopped me cold. You know, we actually sold a house just down the street to a couple with your last name about 8 years ago. The Caldwells? Lovely people. Paid cash for a $1.2 million property. Such a beautiful estate. Indoor pool, tennis court, the works. I felt the blood drain from my face. I'm sorry, did you say Caldwell, Rebecca and Michael Caldwell? Sandra's face lit up. Yes. Do you know them? They mentioned they had a daughter. Are you related? My mind raced. 8 years ago, I was 17, still living at home, still being told we couldn't afford a car newer than a decade old. Can you show me this house? The drive to Maple Ridge Estate felt like entering another dimension. The houses here weren't just expensive. They were mansions. Manicured lawns, circular driveways, gates with security codes. Sandra pulled up to 1247 Maple Ridge Drive, and my world tilted on its axis. There, in the driveway of a sprawling Tudor-style mansion, sat 2 luxury cars, a BMW X7 and a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The license plates read Caldwell 1 and Caldwell 2. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. That's definitely them, Sandra confirmed cheerfully. Mr. Caldwell owns several businesses around town, and Mrs. Caldwell is involved in quite a bit of charity work. They're very private people, though, keep to themselves mostly. I asked Sandra to drive me past the house one more time. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and furniture that probably cost more than I made in a year. The outdoor area featured an Olympic-sized pool with a waterfall feature and what looked like a full outdoor kitchen. For 25 years, I had lived 30 minutes away from this palace, eating ramen noodles for dinner while my parents dined in luxury. While I worked myself to exhaustion to pay for textbooks, they were living like royalty. Every sacrifice I had made, every time I had gone without, every moment I had felt guilty for wanting something nice, it was all based on a lie. I drove home to my small apartment in a daze, my mind spinning with questions. How long had they been wealthy? Where did the money come from? Why had they hidden this from me? And most importantly, what else had they lied about? The next day, I couldn't concentrate on work. I kept thinking about that house, those cars, the casual way Sandra had mentioned my parents paying cash for $1 million property. During my lunch break, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. James Fletcher was a former police detective who now specialized in financial investigations. When I explained the situation, he didn't seem surprised. "You'd be amazed how often I get cases like this," he said. "Family money secrets have a way of coming to light eventually." Within a week, Fletcher had uncovered the tip of an iceberg that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. My father wasn't a low-level accountant. He was the majority shareholder and CEO of Caldwell Financial Services, a company that managed investments for high-net-worth individuals across the Midwest. The business was worth an estimated $15 million. My mother wasn't a part-time administrative assistant. She owned 3 successful boutique clothing stores in Columbus and Cincinnati, with a combined annual revenue of over $2 million. She also had a substantial inheritance from her late father, money that had been sitting in investment accounts for over a decade. But the discovery that shattered me completely was finding out about the college fund. Not only did my parents have the money to pay for my education, they had actually set aside $200,000 specifically for that purpose when I was born. The account had been growing for over 2 decades. While I was working 3 jobs and surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night, there was enough money sitting in a bank account to pay for my tuition, room and board, and living expenses for 4 years. Fletcher handed me a thick folder containing bank statements, property records, business filings, and investment portfolios. The numbers were staggering. My parents were worth approximately $28 million. They owned 4 properties, including a vacation home in the Hamptons and a ski lodge in Aspen. They had been taking international vacations for years, telling me they were visiting my mother's sick relatives, when in reality, they were staying at 5-star resorts in Europe and the Caribbean. I sat in my car outside Fletcher's office, staring at the evidence of my parents' deception, and felt something inside me break. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, love, and the fundamental relationship between parent and child. They had watched me struggle, watched me sacrifice, watched me push myself to the breaking point. All while they could have made my life infinitely easier with a simple phone call to their bank. The hurt was so deep it felt physical, but underneath the pain, something else was growing, something cold and calculating. They had taught me to be financially savvy through necessity. They had made me strong, resourceful, and incredibly good with money because I'd had to be. Now I was going to use every skill they had inadvertently given me to show them exactly what their deception had cost. That night, I started planning. I knew the financial industry inside and out. I had connections, capital, and most importantly, I had the kind of burning motivation that makes people capable of extraordinary things. My parents had hidden their wealth from me for my entire life. It was time to see how they felt when the tables were turned. But first, I needed to know everything. Every account, every investment, every business dealing. If I was going to make them pay for 25 years of lies, I was going to do it right. Over the next 3 weeks, I became obsessed with uncovering every detail of my parents' financial empire. I took vacation time from work and threw myself into research with the intensity of someone solving a murder case. Fletcher continued his investigation, but I couldn't sit still waiting for updates. I needed to understand the full scope of their deception myself. I started with public records. Business registrations, property deeds, court filings. anything that would give me insight into the Caldwell Financial Services empire. What I discovered was that my father had built his wealth through a combination of shrewd investments and questionable business practices that walked the line of legality. The company had been founded 28 years ago, which meant he started it right around the time I was born. He began by managing money for wealthy retirees, promising conservative returns while actually investing their funds in high-risk ventures. When those investments paid off spectacularly during the tech boom of the late 90s, he kept the excess profits for himself, while giving his clients their promised modest returns. This pattern continued for decades. He would take on new clients, promise them safe 6 to 8% annual returns, then invest their money in volatile markets and private equity deals. When the investment succeeded, he pocketed the difference. When they failed, he used money from newer clients to cover the losses, essentially running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme that somehow managed to stay profitable. My mother's boutique empire had its own dark secrets. She had been systematically underreporting her income for years, paying a fraction of the taxes she owed. The stores were also fronts for money laundering, high-end clothing purchases that were immediately returned for cash, allowing dirty money to enter the legitimate financial system. But the detail that made my blood boil was discovering the extent of their charitable work. They had been donating hundreds of thousands of dollars annually to various causes, receiving tax deductions and social recognition for their generosity. Meanwhile, they had watched their own daughter work herself to exhaustion, rather than spend a fraction of that money on her education. I found photos from charity galas, where they posed with local politicians and celebrities, dressed in designer clothing that cost more than my annual rent. In one particularly galling image from last year, my mother was presenting a $50,000 check to a scholarship fund for underprivileged students while I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner to save money. The private investigator's final report arrived on a Tuesday morning. Fletcher had managed to identify every bank account, investment portfolio, and business interest my parents owned. The crown jewel of their financial network was their relationship with Riverside Community Bank, a small but profitable institution where they kept their primary accounts and had significant influence. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. According to Fletcher's research, my parents weren't just customers of Riverside Community Bank. My father sat on the board of directors and owned a substantial stake in the institution. This explained how they had managed to keep their wealth so well hidden. They had inside access to banking records and could manipulate their financial footprint to appear modest to anyone conducting a casual investigation. The bank itself was fascinating. Founded in 1987, it had grown from a small local institution to a regional player with assets of approximately $800 million. It served primarily wealthy individuals and small businesses who valued discretion over flashy marketing, the perfect place for people like my parents to hide their money in plain sight. I spent an entire weekend studying the bank's financial statements, corporate structure, and ownership details. The current CEO, Thomas Wright, was approaching retirement and had been making noise about selling his shares. The bank's stock was privately held, traded only among a small group of investors, which made it both exclusive and potentially vulnerable to a hostile takeover by someone with enough capital and determination. That's when the plan began to crystallize. I couldn't just confront my parents about their deception. They would deny it, minimize it, or find some way to justify their actions. I needed to hit them where it would hurt most: their sense of control and their carefully constructed facade of respectability. If I could gain control of Riverside Community Bank, I would have access to their accounts, their financial history, and most importantly, the power to freeze their assets. It would be poetic justice, using the financial skills they had forced me to develop against the very institution they had used to hide their wealth from me. The technical challenges were enormous. Acquiring a controlling stake in the bank would require approximately $200 million, money I obviously didn't have. But I did have something else: extensive knowledge of financial markets, a spotless reputation in the investment community, and burning motivation that most people couldn't comprehend. I started by reaching out to former colleagues who had moved on to larger firms. Sarah Chen, who had been my supervisor at Henderson and Associates before leaving to start her own private equity fund, agreed to meet me for coffee. I had helped her navigate several complex deals during our time working together, and she owed me a favor. I need to acquire a small regional bank, I told her directly. I have a compelling investment thesis and insider knowledge that makes this a guaranteed profitable venture. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Victoria, bank acquisitions require serious capital. We're talking hundreds of millions. What's your angle here? I had prepared for this question. Riverside Community Bank is sitting on undervalued assets and has significant growth potential in the Ohio market. The current leadership is aging out, and there's an opportunity to modernize their operations and expand their customer base. Conservative projections show a 300% return on investment within 5 years. What I didn't mention was my personal connection to the bank, or the real reason I wanted control of it. Sarah was a businesswoman first, and she would only be interested if the numbers made sense. I spent the next 2 weeks putting together the most comprehensive investment proposal of my career. I analyzed every aspect of Riverside Community Bank's operations, identified genuine opportunities for growth and efficiency improvements, and created financial projections that would make any investor salivate. The beautiful irony was that my plan to use the bank for revenge would actually make it more profitable. Sarah introduced me to her network of high-net-worth individuals who specialized in financial services acquisitions. I pitched my proposal to Marcus Davidson, a billionaire who had made his fortune buying and restructuring small banks across the Midwest. He was intrigued by my analysis and impressed by my track record at Henderson and Associates. You're asking me to invest $200 million based on the recommendations of someone who's barely 30 years old, he said during our second meeting. What makes you think you can run a bank better than people who've been in the business for decades? Because I understand something they don't, I replied. The future of banking is personalized service combined with technological efficiency. Riverside has the customer loyalty and local market knowledge, but they're stuck in 1995 when it comes to operations. I can bring them into the 21st century while maintaining their community focus. Marcus was silent for a long moment, then smiled. I like your confidence, but I want oversight. This isn't a blank check. You'll report to me monthly, and any major decisions require my approval. I agreed immediately. I didn't care about his conditions as long as I got control of the bank. The paperwork was complex, involving shell companies and legal structures designed to obscure the true source of the acquisition funding, but within 6 weeks, we had assembled the capital needed to make an offer. The next step was approaching Thomas Wright and the other shareholders. I crafted a proposal that emphasized the bank's growth potential and my commitment to maintaining its community-focused culture. I presented myself as a young, ambitious financial professional who wanted to honor the bank's legacy while modernizing its operations. Wright was initially skeptical, but when he saw the financial terms of our offer, 40% above the bank's estimated market value, his resistance crumbled. The other board members, including my father, would need to vote on the acquisition, but the generous offer price and my impressive credentials made approval likely. The most delicious part was that my father had no idea who was behind the acquisition. The paperwork listed Marcus Davidson's investment firm as the primary buyer, with me mentioned only as the designated CEO who would oversee operations. To him, I was just another ambitious finance professional looking to make a name for herself in the banking industry. 3 months after discovering my parents' deception, I was weeks away from controlling the very institution they had used to hide their wealth from me. The board meeting to approve the acquisition was scheduled for the following Tuesday. After that, it would just be a matter of time before I had complete access to their financial records and the power to freeze every account they owned. But first, I had one more investigation to complete. I needed to understand exactly how much money we were talking about and where every penny was hidden. Because when I finally revealed the truth to my parents, I wanted them to know that I had uncovered every lie, every deception, every dollar they had kept from me. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Tuesday, October 15th. I arrived at Riverside Community Bank 30 minutes early, wearing my most professional navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase that contained the finalized acquisition documents. The irony of walking into the same building where my parents conducted their secret financial business wasn't lost on me. The bank's interior was exactly what I expected, understated elegance designed to convey stability and discretion. marble floors, dark wood paneling, and oil paintings of Ohio landscapes. This was where wealthy people came to feel secure about their money, and where my parents had felt safe hiding their fortune from their own daughter. Thomas Wright greeted me in the lobby with a firm handshake and nervous smile. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. I have to say, your proposal has generated quite a bit of discussion among our board members." I had been using my middle name, Chen, throughout the acquisition process to avoid any immediate connection to the Caldwell family. "I hope it's been a positive discussion, Mr. Wright." "Oh yes, very positive. Though I should mention that one of our board members has some questions about the timeline." Michael Caldwell, he's been with us for over 15 years, wanted to discuss a few details before we proceed. My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. "Of course, I'm happy to address any concerns." Wright led me to the conference room where 5 other board members were already seated. My father sat at the far end of the table, reviewing documents with the same focused intensity I remembered from my childhood when he would work on client paperwork at the kitchen table. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment I thought he might recognize me, but his gaze passed over me with polite disinterest. The formal presentations went smoothly. I outlined my vision for modernizing the bank's technology infrastructure, expanding their commercial lending department, and developing new investment products for high-net-worth clients. The financial projections were solid, and Marcus Davidson's reputation added credibility to the proposal. Michael raised his hand during the Q&A session. "Ms. Chen, your background is impressive, but you're quite young to be taking on this level of responsibility. What assurance do we have that you won't make reckless decisions that could jeopardize our clients' assets?" I looked directly into my father's eyes as I answered. "Mr. Caldwell, I believe that youth brings innovation and energy that can complement experience and wisdom. I've spent my entire career learning from people who built their success through careful planning and calculated risks. I understand that trust is earned, not given, and I'm prepared to prove myself through results." He nodded approvingly, completely unaware that he was about to hand control of his financial sanctuary to the daughter he had been deceiving for 25 years. The vote was unanimous. By 4:30 p.m., I was the majority owner and CEO of Riverside Community Bank. The paperwork would take a few weeks to finalize, but effective immediately, I had operational control of the institution that held my parents' deepest secrets. Wright stayed late to walk me through the bank's computer systems and security protocols. The previous management was quite particular about client privacy, he explained as we toured the executive offices. "We have some very prominent families who bank with us, and they expect absolute discretion." "I completely understand," I replied, already planning how I would use that discretion to my advantage. My first week as CEO was spent learning the bank's operations and identifying key personnel I could trust. Jennifer Walsh, the head of customer accounts, had worked at the bank for 12 years and knew every major client personally. She would be essential to my plans. "Jennifer, I'd like to review our largest accounts to better understand our client base," I told her during our first meeting. "Can you provide me with a comprehensive list of customers with assets over $1 million? She handed me a thick folder. "These are our top 50 clients. The Caldwell family accounts are some of our largest. They've been with us since the bank opened." There it was, laid out in black and white. My parents had 7 different accounts at Riverside Community Bank, with a combined balance of $4.2 million. But that was just the cash. They also had safety deposit boxes, investment accounts, and a credit line secured by their real estate holdings. Over the next 2 weeks, I systematically gained access to every detail of my parents' financial lives. Their checking account showed regular deposits from Caldwell Financial Services and the boutique stores, along with payments to exclusive country clubs, luxury car dealerships, and high-end travel agencies. One particularly infuriating entry showed a $15,000 payment to a wine storage facility. They had been collecting vintage wines while I was drinking water with dinner to stretch my grocery budget. The safety deposit box inventory was a revelation. In addition to important documents and jewelry, they had been storing cash, gold coins, and bearer bonds worth approximately $800,000. Money that could have eliminated every financial stress from my life, sitting in a metal box just 30 minutes from where I grew up. But the discovery that pushed me over the edge was finding the documentation for my college fund. The account existed exactly as Fletcher had indicated, but the statements showed something even more disturbing. My parents had been actively withdrawing money from the fund throughout my college years, not to pay for my education, but to finance their luxury lifestyle. While I was working 3 jobs, they were using my college money to pay for European vacations and designer furniture. I printed every statement, every transaction record, every piece of evidence that documented their deception. Then I prepared for the confrontation I had been planning for months. The plan was elegantly simple. I would invite my parents to dinner at an expensive restaurant, the kind of place they frequented but had never taken me. During dessert, I would present them with copies of their bank statements and explain that I now controlled their financial institution. Then I would give them a choice. They could voluntarily transfer my college fund money to me and publicly acknowledge their deception, or I could freeze all their accounts and launch a formal investigation into their questionable business practices. I chose Meridian, an upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus where my parents had celebrated their anniversary for the past 5 years. I made reservations for Thursday evening and called them from my office at the bank. "Mom, it's Victoria. I was wondering if you and Dad would like to have dinner with me this Thursday. I have some exciting news to share." Rebecca sounded surprised, but pleased. "Of course, sweetheart. We'd love to see you. Is everything all right?" "Everything's perfect, Mom. I'll pick the restaurant and make reservations." "Just dress nicely. It's going to be a special evening." Thursday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I spent the afternoon at the bank, preparing the final documents I would need for the confrontation. Jennifer had helped me compile a complete financial profile of my parents' accounts, including transaction histories going back 15 years. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I arrived at Meridian 15 minutes early and requested a private corner table where we wouldn't be overheard. The restaurant's ambiance was perfect. Dim lighting, classical music, and an atmosphere of refined wealth that my parents would find comfortable until the moment I shattered their world. Michael and Rebecca arrived precisely on time, both dressed in expensive clothing I now knew they could easily afford. My father wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and my mother's handbag was unmistakably Hermes. They looked like the wealthy couple they actually were, rather than the struggling middle-class parents they had pretended to be. "Victoria, you look wonderful," my mother said, kissing my cheek. "This place is lovely. What's the special occasion?" I smiled warmly, savoring these final moments before everything changed. "I got a promotion, Mom, a big one. I'm now the CEO of a bank." My father's eyebrows shot up. "CEO? At your age? That's incredible, honey. Which bank?" "Riverside Community," I said, watching his face carefully. "Maybe you've heard of it." For just a moment, Michael's expression flickered with confusion, then recognition, then something approaching panic. But he recovered quickly, forcing a smile. "Riverside Community? Yes, I think I know that one. Small local institution, right?" "That's right, Dad. Very small, very local, very familiar with their clients' personal financial situations." The waiter appeared to take our drink orders, providing a brief intermission before the main event. I ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon, the same champagne my parents had been buying for their private celebrations while telling me we couldn't afford pizza delivery. "We're celebrating tonight," I announced as the waiter poured the champagne, to family secrets finally coming to light. My parents exchanged glances as we clinked glasses, clearly unsure what to make of my cryptic toast. The champagne was exquisite. I could taste why they had been buying cases of it while I survived on instant ramen. "So tell us about this new position," Rebecca said, attempting to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "How did you manage to become a CEO so quickly? We're so proud of you, sweetheart." The word proud hit me like a physical blow. Proud of what? Proud that I had succeeded despite their sabotage? Proud that I had overcome obstacles they had deliberately placed in my path? "Well, Mom, it's interesting you mentioned pride," I said, reaching into my briefcase, "because I've learned some fascinating things about family pride recently." I pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table between us. Before we ordered dinner, I thought we might want to discuss some family business. Michael's face had gone pale. He recognized the folder. It was the same type the bank used for confidential client documents. "Victoria, what is this about?" "Open it, Dad." With trembling hands, he opened the folder to reveal the first page. A summary of all Caldwell family accounts at Riverside Community Bank. The color drained completely from his face as his eyes scanned the numbers. Rebecca leaned over to look and gasped audibly. "How did you get this?" "This is private financial information." "You're absolutely right, Mom. It is private financial information. Very private. The kind of information that parents typically share with their children, especially when that child is struggling to pay for college while working 3 jobs." The table fell silent, except for the soft classical music playing in the background. Other diners continued their conversations around us, completely unaware that a family was imploding just a few feet away. "Victoria, I can explain," Michael started. "No, Dad, you can't explain this. There is no explanation for watching your daughter eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner while you spend her college fund on wine collections." I flipped to the next page, which showed the transaction history for my college fund account. This is particularly interesting reading. December 2019 minus $25,000 withdrawal for European vacation. March 2020 minus $18,000 for home improvements. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts at the restaurant to make rent. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't finished. "The real masterpiece is this," I said, turning to a page that showed their charitable donations. "Last year alone, you donated $87,000 to various causes. You gave more money to strangers than you spent on your own daughter's education. You had your picture taken presenting a check to a scholarship fund while I was living on instant noodles and secondhand textbooks." "Sweetheart, please let us explain," Rebecca whispered. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're right, Mom. It is complicated. Because here's what I find really complicated. How did you expect to keep this secret forever? Did you think I would never find out? Did you think I would just accept being poor while you lived like royalty?" Michael finally found his voice. "We wanted to teach you the value of hard work. We wanted you to be independent, to not rely on handouts." "Handouts?" I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Several nearby diners turned to look. "Dad, that money was mine, my college fund. Money you set aside for my education, and then stole to pay for your lifestyle. That's not teaching me independence. That's theft." "Victoria, please sit down," Rebecca pleaded, looking around nervously at the other patrons. "People are staring." "Oh, now you're worried about appearances? That's rich, coming from someone who's been living a double life for 25 years. I sat back down but leaned forward, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna sit there and listen while I tell you exactly what I've discovered about your little empire." I began methodically going through each page of documentation, their real estate holdings, including properties I'd never heard of, their business interests, which were far more extensive than I'd realized, their investment portfolios, which showed returns that would make Wall Street jealous, the vacation home in the Hamptons that was purchased the same year I started college, the ski lodge in Aspen, bought while I was working night shifts to pay for textbooks. This wine collection, I pointed to another statement, represents more money than I made in 4 years of part-time jobs. With each revelation, my parents seemed to shrink further into their seats. Michael's hands were shaking as he reached for his champagne glass. Rebecca kept dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, but I felt no sympathy. "The piece de resistance," I continued, "is discovering that Dad sits on the board of directors at Riverside Community Bank. You weren't just hiding money from me, you were using your position to ensure it stayed hidden. You had inside access to cover your tracks." Michael cleared his throat. "Victoria, I need you to understand." "No, Dad, I understand perfectly. I understand that you watched me work myself into exhaustion, rather than give me a single dollar from the college fund you created for me. I understand that you let me believe we were struggling financially while you lived in luxury. I understand that you are not the people I thought you were." Quote, I pulled out the final document, a bank authorization form. This brings us to the present moment. You see, when I told you I became CEO of Riverside Community Bank, I wasn't just making conversation. I own your bank now. Every account you have, every transaction you make, every financial secret you've been hiding, it all goes through me. The realization hit them simultaneously. Michael's face went from pale to ashen, and Rebecca actually gasped out loud. "That's impossible," Michael stammered. "The acquisition was handled by Davidson Investment Group. Some young woman named Chen." "Chen is my middle name, Dad. The same middle name you gave me, which comes from Mom's side of the family. The same middle name that's been on every document I've ever signed, if you'd ever bothered to pay attention." Rebecca started crying in earnest now. "Victoria, please. We can fix this. We can transfer the money back. We can." "You can do what, Mom? Can you give me back my childhood? Can you give me back the years I spent believing I wasn't worth investing in? Can you give me back the trust I had in my parents?" I signaled the waiter for the check. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, every one of your accounts at Riverside Community Bank will be frozen pending a comprehensive audit. I'm going to examine every transaction, every transfer, every penny that went in or out. If I find evidence of illegal activity, and based on what I've seen so far, I'll be turning that information over to the appropriate authorities." "You can't do this," Michael said desperately. "We're your parents." "You're right, Dad. You are my parents. And parents are supposed to protect their children, support them, help them succeed. Instead, you sabotaged me for your own selfish purposes. So yes, I can do this. In fact, it's the least I can do." I placed my business card on the table next to the financial documents. "My office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you want to discuss the terms of unfreezing your accounts, you can make an appointment like any other client." Standing up, I gathered my papers and put on my coat. "Oh, and Mom, Dad, that college fund you stole from me? As of tomorrow, it's going to start accruing interest. 25 years of interest. I think 8% annually is fair, don't you? After all, that's what you've been earning on your investments while I was eating ramen noodles." Quote, I walked away from the table without looking back, leaving my parents sitting in stunned silence among the ruins of their secret life. The champagne sat untouched, the expensive dinner unordered, and their world completely shattered. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but a deep, calm certainty that justice was finally being served. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. The next morning, I arrived at Riverside Community Bank at 7 a.m., 2 hours before opening. I had barely slept, but adrenaline was keeping me sharp and focused. Jennifer Walsh was already at her desk, preparing for what she knew would be an unusual day. "Are you certain about this course of action, Ms. Chen?" she asked, as we reviewed the account freeze orders. "The Caldwell family has been with us for nearly 20 years. This will create significant complications. Jennifer, I need you to understand something. This isn't personal vindictiveness. It's a necessary audit of potentially fraudulent activity. If the accounts are clean, they'll be unfrozen within a week. If they're not, I let the implication hang in the air. At exactly 9 a.m., I executed the freezes on all 7 Caldwell family accounts. Within 30 minutes, my phone started ringing. "Victoria, what have you done?" Michael's voice was strained, desperate. "I tried to access our checking account to pay the housekeeper, and the transaction was declined. The automated system says all our accounts are under administrative review." "Good morning, Dad. I'm glad the system is working properly. As I mentioned last night, all Caldwell family accounts are frozen pending a comprehensive audit. You can't do this to us. We have bills to pay, employees to cover." "Then you should have thought about that before you spent my college fund on wine collections. If you'd like to discuss the situation, you're welcome to make an appointment through my assistant." I hung up and immediately called our legal department to ensure all procedures were being followed correctly. The last thing I needed was a lawsuit that could undermine my position. By noon, both my parents had called 6 more times. Rebecca had even driven to the bank, demanding to speak with me in person. Security escorted her out when she refused to leave without accessing her accounts. The real drama began on day 3. Michael arrived at the bank in a rumpled suit. The first time I'd ever seen him look anything less than perfectly groomed. His eyes were bloodshot, and his usual confidence was completely gone. "Victoria, please. You have to understand. We have payroll to meet." Caldwell Financial Services employs 12 people. If I can't make payroll, innocent people will suffer. I looked at him across my desk, this man who had once seemed so powerful and controlled. Dad, you're absolutely right. Innocent people shouldn't suffer because of other people's poor choices. I agree completely. Hope flickered in his eyes. So you'll unfreeze the business accounts? No, but I will offer you a solution. You can take out a short-term loan from Riverside Community Bank to cover your immediate expenses. Our commercial lending rate is 12% annually, and we'll need collateral equal to twice the loan amount. His face crumpled. Victoria, that's highway robbery. Our personal assets are tied up in the frozen accounts. We can't provide that kind of collateral. Then I guess you'll need to find another solution. Maybe you could ask your employees to work for free, the way you expected me to pay for college. He stormed out without another word, but I knew he'd be back. People like my father always came back when they needed something. The audit Jennifer and I conducted over the next week revealed financial irregularities that were far worse than I had initially suspected. My father's business practices weren't just ethically questionable, they were criminal. He had been systematically overcharging clients for services, skimming money from investment returns, and falsifying tax documents for over a decade. My mother's boutiques were even more problematic. The money laundering operation was sophisticated and extensive, involving fake sales transactions and fraudulent returns that had cleaned millions of dollars in questionable funds. The IRS would be very interested in the discrepancies between her reported income and her actual revenues. On Friday afternoon, I called Detective Angela Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit of the Columbus Police Department. We had worked together on a fraud case involving one of Henderson and Associates' clients, and I knew she was thorough and discreet. Detective Rodriguez, I need to report suspected financial crimes involving systematic fraud and money laundering. The evidence suggests ongoing criminal activity spanning more than 10 years. Quote, she arrived at the bank within an hour, accompanied by a federal agent from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I presented them with copies of all the documentation I had compiled, walking them through each suspicious transaction and explaining the patterns I had identified. Ms. Chen, this is substantial evidence of multiple felonies, Rodriguez said after reviewing the materials. We'll need to coordinate with federal authorities, given the scope and duration of these activities. Are you prepared for the potential consequences of this investigation? Detective, these people stole from their own daughter for 25 years, while committing fraud against their clients and the government. I'm absolutely prepared for whatever consequences follow. That evening, my parents made their final desperate attempt to negotiate. They arrived at my apartment unannounced, looking haggard and defeated. Michael's expensive suit was wrinkled, and Rebecca's designer handbag was absent, probably because their credit cards had been declined. Victoria, we need to talk, Rebecca said as I reluctantly let them in. This has gone too far. No, Mom, this hasn't gone far enough. Do you have any idea what I discovered during the audit? I spread copies of the most damning evidence across my coffee table. Dad, you've been stealing from your clients for over a decade. Mom, your boutiques are money laundering fronts. Both of you have been committing tax fraud on a massive scale. Michael collapsed into my couch, his head in his hands. We never meant for it to go this far. It started small, just taking a little extra profit here and there. But then the lifestyle became normal, and we couldn't scale back without raising questions. So you decided to steal my college fund to maintain your criminal lifestyle? We always planned to pay it back, Rebecca whispered. We thought you'd never find out. We thought we were teaching you valuable lessons about independence and hard work. You taught me lessons, all right. You taught me that the people I trusted most in the world were capable of betraying me in ways I never imagined. You taught me that blood doesn't make someone family. Actions do. I gathered up the documents and put them back in their folder. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn yourselves in to Detective Rodriguez on Monday morning. You're going to confess to everything and cooperate fully with the investigation. In exchange, I'll recommend leniency based on your cooperation. And if we don't? Michael asked quietly. Then the full weight of the federal investigation falls on you without any mitigation for my testimony. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. You're looking at decades in federal prison. They sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Finally, Rebecca spoke. What about the bank accounts? What about our home? The legitimate assets will be returned to you after the investigation, minus restitution for your victims and back taxes owed. The rest will be seized as proceeds from criminal activity. As for your home, I paused, considering. The house in Westfield was purchased with stolen money. That will probably be forfeit. Where are we supposed to live? She asked desperately. I thought about the modest 3-bedroom house where I grew up. The house they had pretended was all they could afford. I'm sure you'll figure something out. After all, you're very good at adapting to your circumstances. They left my apartment that night looking like different people. Smaller, older, broken. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness watching them go. Justice was being served, but there was no joy in watching my parents destroy themselves. On Monday morning, Michael and Rebecca Caldwell walked into the Columbus Police Department and confessed to multiple financial crimes. The investigation that followed made headlines across Ohio, exposing one of the largest family-run financial fraud schemes in the state's history. I testified as a key witness, providing evidence that helped prosecutors secure convictions on dozens of charges. My father received 8 years in federal prison. My mother got 5 years. Their businesses were dissolved, their assets seized, and their reputations destroyed. But that wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of something new. 2 years have passed since my parents were sentenced, and Riverside Community Bank has become something entirely different under my leadership. What started as a vehicle for revenge transformed into a legitimate opportunity to build something meaningful. The first major change I implemented was creating a scholarship program for first-generation college students from working-class families. Every year, we award full, 4-year scholarships to 20 students who demonstrate academic excellence despite financial hardship. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using my parents' former bank to provide opportunities they had denied me. Marcus Davidson initially questioned the scholarship program during one of our monthly reviews. Victoria, this is a significant expense that doesn't directly benefit our bottom line. Are you sure this is the best use of our resources? Marcus, these scholarships represent an investment in the kind of people who will become our future clients. Students who understand the value of money because they've had to work for it. Students who won't take financial security for granted because they've lived without it. The program has been more successful than I ever imagined. Our scholarship recipients have gone on to careers in medicine, engineering, business, and law. Many of them have returned as clients, bringing their families and friends with them. The bank's reputation in the community has grown tremendously, and our customer base has expanded by 40% in 2 years. But the real transformation happened within me. Running the bank taught me that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, wasn't enough to heal the damage my parents had caused. I needed to build something positive from the ashes of their betrayal. I established a financial literacy program for high school students in underserved communities. Every month, our staff visits local schools to teach classes on budgeting, saving, and understanding credit. We've reached over 3,000 students in the past 2 years, giving them tools I wish I'd had when I was struggling to pay for college. The most rewarding aspect has been mentoring young women who remind me of myself at their age. Ambitious, hardworking, but lacking the family support that makes success easier. I've hired several of them as interns, and 2 have become full-time employees after graduation. Emma Rodriguez, one of our scholarship recipients, reminded me why this work matters. She grew up in a single-parent household where her mother worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. When Emma received our scholarship, she cried in my office for 10 minutes straight. Ms. Chen, you don't understand what this means, she said through her tears. I was going to have to choose between college and helping my mom pay rent. Now I can do both. Emma is now in her junior year, studying computer science at Ohio State, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working part-time at our IT department. She's everything I was at her age, but with the support I never had. The changes weren't limited to community programs. I modernized the bank's technology infrastructure, introduced mobile banking applications, and streamlined our loan approval processes. We became known for treating small business owners with the same respect and attention we gave to millionaire clients. Jennifer Walsh, who had been skeptical of my methods initially, became one of my strongest supporters. Victoria, I've worked in banking for 20 years, And I've never seen an institution transform itself so completely while maintaining its core values, she told me during our annual review. The success attracted attention from larger financial institutions interested in acquiring us. Last month, I received an offer from a national bank wanting to buy Riverside Community for 3 times what Marcus and I had paid for it. The offer would make me personally wealthy beyond anything I had imagined when I started this journey. I turned it down without hesitation. This isn't about money anymore, I explained to Marcus during our discussion. This bank represents something bigger than profit margins. It's proof that you can build something meaningful from the worst circumstances. My personal life has evolved as well. I moved out of my small apartment and bought a beautiful house in the suburbs. Not the ostentatious mansion my parents had hidden, but a comfortable home that reflects my values. I drive a reliable car that I paid for honestly, eat at restaurants I can afford without guilt, and sleep peacefully knowing that everything I have was earned through legitimate work. The hardest part has been dealing with the aftermath of my parents' imprisonment. They write letters occasionally, usually asking for money or trying to justify their actions. I stopped reading them months ago. Some relationships once broken can't be repaired. My extended family has been divided about my actions. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, called me heartless for turning in my own parents. Family is supposed to stick together, she lectured me during a tense phone conversation. Patricia, family is supposed to support each other, not steal from each other, I replied. They made their choices. I made mine. Other relatives have been more supportive. My cousin David, who had his own struggles with money growing up, reached out to thank me for exposing the truth. I always wondered how Uncle Michael and Aunt Rebecca could afford their lifestyle, he said. Now it all makes sense. The media attention was intense for several months. Local news stations covered the trial extensively, and business journals wrote articles about the youngest bank CEO in Ohio history. I gave a few interviews, focusing on the importance of financial transparency and ethical business practices. One journalist asked me if I regretted my actions, given the pain they caused my family. I regret that my parents put themselves in a position where this was necessary, I answered, but I don't regret holding them accountable for their actions. The question that haunts me isn't whether I did the right thing. I know I did. It's whether I've truly forgiven them. Forgiveness isn't about absolving someone of their actions. It's about freeing yourself from the anger those actions created. Some days I feel like I've achieved that peace. Other days the betrayal still stings. What I do know is that I've created something positive from their destruction. Every scholarship we award, every small business loan we approve, every financial literacy class we teach, represents a victory over the cynicism their actions could have instilled in me. Last week, I received a letter from Sarah Martinez, one of our first scholarship recipients who just graduated with honors from medical school. Miss Chen, she wrote, I start my residency next month at Cleveland Clinic. None of this would have been possible without the opportunity you gave me. I promise to pay it forward. That letter sits framed on my desk, reminding me daily that the pain my parents caused wasn't wasted if it led to helping others avoid similar struggles. The bank continues to grow and thrive. We're opening a second location next year and have been approached by community leaders in 3 other cities about expanding our programs. What started as a tool for revenge has become a platform for creating opportunities for others. I'm 32 years old now, and I've built a life that's entirely my own. No hidden money, no family secrets, no lies to maintain. Everything I have was earned honestly, and everything I've accomplished reflects my own values and choices. My parents will be released from prison in a few years. I don't know if they'll try to contact me, and I don't know how I'll respond if they do. What I do know is that I'm no longer the struggling young woman they betrayed. I'm someone who turned their deception into a force for good. The little girl who worked 3 jobs to pay for college would be amazed to see what she became. Not because of the success or the money, but because she learned that the worst betrayals can sometimes lead to the most meaningful victories. That's the real lesson of this story. Not that revenge is sweet, but that you can choose to build something beautiful from the ruins of what others tried to destroy. 3 years after my parents' sentencing, an unexpected phone call changed everything again. It was a Tuesday morning in September when my assistant buzzed my office intercom. Ms. Chen, there's a call for you on line 2. The caller says it's regarding Michael and Rebecca Caldwell. Should I take a message? My stomach tightened. I'll take it. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, a woman with a slight southern accent. Ms. Chen, my name is Margaret Foster. I'm calling from Atlanta Federal Prison. I'm the chaplain here, and I've been working with your mother, Rebecca Caldwell. I hadn't spoken to either of my parents in over a year. Their letters had stopped coming, and I assumed they had finally accepted that our relationship was permanently severed. Chaplain Foster, I appreciate your call, but I'm not sure what this has to do with me. Ms. Chen, your mother has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors estimate she has perhaps 3 months left. She's been asking to speak with you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever anger I still carried toward my mother, learning she was dying, brought an unexpected wave of emotions I wasn't prepared for. How long has she been sick? About 6 weeks. She didn't want anyone to contact you initially, but as her condition has worsened, she's expressed deep regret about your estrangement. She knows she has no right to ask, but she hopes you might consider visiting. I stared out my office window at the bustling street below, watching people go about their normal lives while mine tilted once again. Chaplain Foster, I need some time to think about this. That evening, I called Dr. Catherine Wells, the therapist I had been seeing since the trial ended. She had helped me process the complex emotions surrounding my parents' betrayal and my subsequent actions. Victoria, this is clearly a difficult situation, Dr. Wells said during our emergency session. What are you feeling right now? Confused. Angry that she's forcing me to deal with this. Guilty for feeling angry about someone who's dying. Scared that seeing her will undo all the progress I've made. What would you regret more? Seeing her and having a difficult conversation, or not seeing her and wondering for the rest of your life what she might have said? That question haunted me for 3 days. Finally, I booked a flight to Atlanta. Atlanta Federal Prison was a stark, intimidating complex, surrounded by high fences and guard towers. After going through extensive security procedures, I was escorted to a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and nothing else. The sterile environment felt appropriate for what I expected to be an equally cold conversation. When the guard brought my mother in, I barely recognized her. The elegant, well-dressed woman I remembered had been replaced by someone frail and hollow. Her hair was gone, likely from chemotherapy, and her skin had a grayish pallor that spoke of serious illness. She moved slowly, as if every step caused pain. "Victoria," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears the moment she saw me. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I replied honestly. We sat in silence for several moments, neither knowing how to begin a conversation that needed to address years of betrayal and pain. "How are you feeling?" I finally asked, immediately regretting the banality of the question. "Physically? Terrible. Emotionally? Worse." She attempted a weak smile. "The cancer is aggressive. The doctors here do what they can, but we all know how this ends." "Mom, why did you want to see me?" Rebecca's composure cracked. "Because I need you to understand something before I die. What we did to you wasn't about the money, it was about fear." "Fear of what?" "Fear that if you knew we were wealthy, you wouldn't need us anymore. Fear that you would judge us for having money while others struggled. Fear that we weren't good enough parents to deserve your love without the bond that shared struggle creates." I stared at her, trying to process this explanation. "So you decided to make me struggle unnecessarily?" "We thought we were preparing you for life. We thought hardship would make you stronger, more resilient. We told ourselves we were doing it for your own good. But you used my college fund for your own expenses. You watched me work myself to exhaustion. How was that for my own good?" Rebecca broke down completely, sobbing in a way that shook her entire fragile frame. "It wasn't. We got caught up in maintaining our lifestyle and convinced ourselves that taking the money was temporary. We always planned to pay it back before you found out. Except you never did pay it back, and I did find out. Victoria, I know we don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what we did was unforgivable. But I need you to know that not a day has passed in this prison that I haven't regretted our choices. Not just because of the consequences, but because we hurt the person we love most in the world." The raw pain in her voice was genuine, but it didn't erase the years of deception. Mom, your regret doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give me back the relationship I thought I had with my parents. I know, but maybe it can give you peace. Maybe knowing that we're truly sorry can help you move forward without carrying our mistakes with you forever. We talked for another hour. Rebecca told me about her life in prison, the other inmates who had become unlikely friends, the books she had read, the volunteer work she did in the prison library. She asked about the bank, about my life, about whether I was happy. Are you happy, Victoria, despite everything we put you through? I considered the question carefully. I'm successful. I'm proud of what I've built. I'm making a difference in other people's lives. Whether that's the same as happiness, I'm not sure yet. Your father writes to me every week from his prison in Pennsylvania. He's proud of what you've accomplished, even though he knows he has no right to be. How is he handling incarceration? Badly. He was always so concerned with status and appearance. Prison has been devastating for him. But he's learned to teach financial literacy classes to other inmates. In a strange way, he's finally using his skills to help people instead of taking advantage of them. When visiting time ended, Rebecca reached across the table and touched my hand, the first physical contact we'd had in over 3 years. Victoria, I know I'm going to die soon. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect you to grieve for me. But I want you to know that you turned out to be everything I hoped you would be, just not in the way I expected. You're strong, principled, and compassionate. You took our worst betrayal and used it to help others. I'm proud of the woman you became, even though I had very little to do with it. The flight back to Columbus gave me time to process the visit. Seeing my mother dying and broken didn't erase the anger, but it added layers of complexity I hadn't expected. She was still the woman who had betrayed me, but she was also a scared, flawed person who had made terrible choices for complicated reasons. 2 weeks later, Chaplain Foster called to tell me Rebecca had died peacefully in the prison hospital. She had left a letter for me, along with instructions that any remaining assets from her boutique businesses should be donated to our scholarship fund. The letter was brief but haunting. Victoria, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I spent my last weeks thinking about the mother I should have been, and the daughter you deserve to have. I can't change our past, but I hope my final act can contribute to the future you're building. Use this money to help other young women achieve their dreams without the obstacles we placed in your path. Maybe that small gesture can begin to balance the scales of what we took from you. I love you, and I'm sorry. Mom. The donation amounted to $180,000, enough to fund 4 additional full scholarships. At the scholarship ceremony that fall, I announced the Rebecca Caldwell Memorial Scholarships, established in memory of someone who learned too late that a parent's greatest gift to their child is honest support. My father was released from prison 6 months later. He called me once, asking if we could meet for coffee. I declined, but I sent him information about our financial literacy program in case he wanted to continue the work he had started in prison. I'm not ready to have a relationship with you, I wrote in my response, but I respect that you're trying to use your experiences to help others. If you continue on that path, maybe someday we can find a way to coexist. He never called again, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had gotten a job at a nonprofit organization helping recently released inmates manage their finances and find employment. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. Today, 5 years after I first discovered my parents' deception, Riverside Community Bank has become a model for ethical community banking. We've awarded over 100 scholarships, helped finance 50 small businesses, and provided financial education to thousands of young people. I still think about my parents sometimes, but the anger has faded into something more like sadness, not for what they did to me, but for what they did to themselves. They had everything they needed to be happy, and chose deception instead. They could have been proud parents supporting their daughter's dreams. Instead, they became criminals who lost everything. The little girl who grew up thinking her family was poor learned that the greatest poverty isn't financial. It's the poverty of spirit that makes people choose lies over love, deception over honesty, and selfishness over sacrifice. I built something beautiful from their betrayal, but I would trade it all to have had honest parents who supported my dreams from the beginning. That's a lesson I carry with me every day as I work to be the kind of person who builds others up instead of tearing them down. Some stories don't have happy endings. But sometimes, if you're willing to do the work, they can have meaningful ones. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.